May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. I give Jesus a lot of credit for trying to teach in the synagogue in his hometown. I dearly love my mother, but when she was alive, it made me nervous to think of her being out in the congregation whenever I had to preach. She knew me. She knew me like no one else knew me. And when we did talk afterwards how things were going in the church, she would always ask me, "You're not preaching longer than 10 minutes, right?" To which my brother-in-law invariably would always chime in, 10 minutes, under 8 minutes. Actually, 5 would be ideal. So I give Jesus a lot of credit here. In C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan, the Lion King of Narnia, represents a Christ figure. And Lucy, a young girl and main character, conversing with Mr. Beaver, is curious about Aslan. She has never seen him, but has heard that he is on the move, and she anticipates meeting him. "Is he safe?" she asks. "Who said anything about being safe?" said Mr. Beaver. "Of course he's not safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you." Jesus is on the move, and those in his hometown cannot wait to see him, but they want him to be safe and good. Mark's gospel is known for being to the point and having a sense of urgency. So Mark simply tells us that when Jesus came to his hometown with his disciples, on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded and took offense at him. Luke gives us a fuller account of this story in his gospel. There, Jesus reads from Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." All pretty good, but strongly implying an identity as a Messiah. A pretty big reach for a hometown carpenter and Mary's son, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and those girls. And then in Luke, Jesus goes on to speak of those non-Jews over the years who had more faith than those of his hometown congregation, those right in front of him. No wonder his homecoming ends in Luke with a crowd ready to pitch him off a cliff. And in Mark's gospel, Jesus, amazed by the people's unbelief, is unable to do any deeds of power and is able only to cure a few who are sick. And so he moves on. Think of what a nice homecoming weekend it could have been if Jesus just hadn't challenged his hometown crowd and hadn't made everyone so uncomfortable. And how true for us as well. Barbara Brown Taylor contends that we are the religious people whose religion can get in our way. We are Jesus' hometown kin who do not always honor him. The biggest truth this story tells us, she believes, is that the community of faith is one of Jesus's toughest audiences, especially when what he says often offends us. We have our own channels of power, she believes, clearly marked, and we are suspicious of people who operate outside of them. God is always sending us people to disturb us, she notes, to wake us up, to yank our chains, to set us on fire. Because about the worst thing that can happen to us, religiously speaking, is for us to hold perfectly still without changing a thing until we turn into fossils. God is not behind us, holding us back. God is ahead of us, calling us forward. God is all around us, speaking to us through the most unlikely people. Sometimes it is a mysterious stranger, but more often, it seems, it is people so familiar to us that we simply overlook them. Our own children, our parents, our own friends and neighbors, all of those hometown prophets who challenge us and love us and tell us who we are. And the closer they are to us, the less likely we are to hear them. But as Taylor says, what a waste of God's resources to ignore those who know us best. There is much work to be done in building up God's kingdom in our world, our nation, in our communities, in our families, within our very selves. How and through whom does God challenge each of us again and again and again? Not to leave us to feel stuck and feeling guilty or less than, but to open our eyes to the wonder of it all, to the mystery of God's love for each and every one of us, and for all of God's creation, to open our eyes and our hearts to the holy in our midst.